stuffs required when you want to plan for the vCenter. What are the different prerequisite that you have to consider, and what is the CPU memory and those things, right? Today, what we'll do is like we'll jump into the vCenter related components. Okay, as I've listed some of those there. So what I'll do is like I'll not jump too much historically, but still like I'll cover 5, 6, and 7. Okay, versions 5, 6, and 7. Okay, when vCenter was in the version 5, okay, maybe like I'll say 5.1 is a much stable version, or 5.5. Let's consider these two versions. Okay, so at that point of time, vCenter had multiple different components within it. Okay, so whatever you are seeing, right, when you log into your ESXi host, or whenever you log into your vCenter system, you can see that there is a hierarchy of components or objects arranged in a hierarchical manner, like your data center, cluster, ESXi host, virtual machines, and so on, right? So those listing is something which comes from the vCenter's inventory service. vCenter has a sub-component called inventory service that provides you a linkage or kind of hierarchical arrangement of all the components in vCenter. Okay, Satish, I'm just about to start. Okay, thanks for
Yeah,
joining.
thank you. Sorry, I'm late. Yeah.
No worries. Yeah. So I'm just kind of starting with vCenter server components. Yesterday we were discussing about deploying the vCenter and what are the prerequisites. And then today, like we'll be discussing more into what are the different components that make up the vCenter and how we can deploy it practically. Today we'll try and complete installation of Windows-based vCenter and Linux-based virtual appliance. Okay, so those are the two things that we can try today, and if possible, we'll do an upgrade and also migration on Friday, if not possible today. Okay, so vCenter inventory service is the primary important service which provides you a hierarchical view of what are the different components and how they are linked and stuff. Okay, and the next thing is we have something called vSphere web client. Okay, that is the primary tool that is used to connect to your vCenter. So initially, like web client was having the full functionalities when you connect to a vCenter or when you connect to a client system or the ESXi host. Okay, the vCenter web client connection to the vCenter, it was providing the full functionalities before. But then now, you know, right, as part of the web client, now things have changed and everything has come into HTML based client these days. So let me just put it here on the right. Okay, on the vSphere 7 side, we have the vSphere HTML5 client. But again, this is also a web based. When I say web based, you have to use a web browser to connect to it. You don't need any app or thick client on your machine. So yeah, web client was the second main component, and then we had vCenter single sign on. Okay, let me explain what exactly single sign on is. Single sign on, and then we had the vCenter. So these are the four different components that make up the vCenter initially in versions 5.1 and 5.5. When you talk about vCenter, they are split into four different components. But then in the version 6, okay, in vCenter version 6, what they did is they merged a couple of things. Okay, so all these inventory service, web client, and the single sign-on, they got merged into something called platform services controller. Okay, all the functionalities that were outside of vCenter, they all got converged into something called platform services controller, and then we also have the vCenter server. Okay, so these are the two components that made the vCenter system in version 6. Okay, and here when it comes to version 7, there are some changes, and everything is actually put into one single bucket. Okay, so we have only vCenter server now. It does not have any external PSE or external platform services controller. Those concepts are no more. Now we have something called vCenter server only, and it covers all different components, whatever is required in vSphere 7. So historically, we had multiple subcomponents. Even on date, whatever functionalities were part of the single sign-on and the inventory service and those things still remains. Okay, still remains, but they are not exposed as a separate service or a separate component. So earlier you can deploy your platform services controller in a separate machine so that you can handle multiple vCenter instances in parallel with single PSE, something like that. But now these things is no more an option. Okay, so you can either deploy the platform services controller role as an embedded or an external option. Okay, so these options were provided earlier, but now it's not an option anymore. So let's get into the components what I've discussed so far. The very first component is the vCenter component, right? So as we discussed yesterday, vCenter is the service, or it can be a Windows service, or it can be a program which is a default program. And where exactly it is, here it is, right? So we were discussing on this yesterday on the vCenter component. You guys were much familiar. Okay, so yeah, centralized management of virtualized data center environment. It is used to manage ESXi host and virtual machines. We have a lot of centralized management options, right? So it can be a Windows server service, or it can be an appliance. It is used for primarily managing your virtualized data center environment. So yeah, it is used to manage centralized management of VMware virtualized data center environments. The next thing is your vCenter single sign-on. Okay, any idea on what exactly is SSO or single sign-on? Have you guys heard about it? Have you guys thought about it?
Single sign-on
It's
normally
like
refers to AD
Yeah,
authentication, right?
yeah,
Directly.
yeah. Okay, so it can okay, it can be AD authentication. Fine. Okay, what else? Okay, let me give more importance to it, because like many people ask about it, and you have to be pretty much comfortable on answering that. Okay, yeah, try whatever you want to give us an answer.
I
Yeah.
mean, if you have linked environment, linked vCenters, you no need to go for different user IDs, and you can probably jump in from there, I think. Is that
Okay, that is how you think. Okay, so okay, fine. What else?
no? Is that correct?
Yeah. So it's kind of correct, but again, yeah. So VMware, VMware ESXi 5 and above, or whatever special 6. Okay. So in vCenter, you get a default domain. Okay. So you get a default domain. Okay, that is kind of labeled as vSphere.local. Okay, to start with, okay, don't get too much deep into the number of vCenters or the linked concept and those things. To start with, what you do is, okay, as a user, what you are trying to do is you are kind of trying to log in as a user, and the user request generally goes to, you generally log into vSphere web client. Okay, and from the vSphere web client, where exactly the SSO resides in the version that we are studying now. Is it part of vCenter, or is it part of platform services controller? Your single
Mm,
sign-on
it should
it's a
be
platform services.
platform services.
controller, right? Yeah. So your platform services controller is what has the single sign-on as of now. So your platform services controller takes the request in. Your platform, your VMware platform is controlled by this PSE actually. So whatever login, whatever management activities, whatever task that you perform, PSE does take care of a lot of management related tasks, and single sign-on is one main component part of it. Okay, so let me, yeah, single sign-on. And then you can, as you said, it can connect to multiple identity sources. So that doesn't mean uh, there is just a single domain within vCenter and you have to make use of it. Not like that. You have multiple options to play around. Let me just move these GoToMeeting stuffs to outside. Okay, so you have at least 3 to 4 identity sources. Okay, the main primary source is like your single sign-on default domain, which is nothing but your vSphere.local. And the second main option is Active Directory. So it should be 2003 and above, but nowadays like it has to be a latest version, at least like 2012 R2 or something like that, whichever is in support. But it will work even with 2003 and later. But 2003, 2008 are end of support life, and they are not even a consideration. So go for 2012 R2 and above. Okay, and then you have something called AD over LDAP. Okay, so integrated AD with Kerberos and those things can also work. Even you can use LDAP, and you can also use Open LDAP from Linux directly. And earlier, like we also had NIS and those things, but nowadays it's not there. It's kind of deprecated. Okay, I'm talking to some couple of versions back. But then we also had the local OS. So whenever you install a Windows operating system, you also have a local operating system users and groups, and you can also connect to it to a separate domain, and then access the identity present in that Active Directory domain, right? So these are all different things. Okay, so some people will get confused with the default domain and the local OS. Default domain comes from the vCENTER VMware product, whereas the local OS comes from the base operating system, your Linux or Windows operating system, that has its own username and password. I mean, users and groups, which we can leverage, number one. And the default domain gets created when you install the vCENTER. Okay, that is from the VMware layer. And then you can go for any of the external identity sources. Okay, there are 3 different options. One at the OS layer, one at the VMware layer, and the other one at the external side. These are all identity sources which you can use along with single sign-on to manage your VMware environment. So these are all identity sources. So identity is nothing but your users, groups, and whatever I mean, service account, whatever the credentials, username and password you use for authentication and authorization, they all come from the identity sources. And then getting into the most important thing, so why we are going to log into the VMware platform. So as he highlighted, it's not just for your VMware vCenter alone, right? We also have a lot of other components which we need to connect to. So once we are logged into your single sign-on domain, this single sign-on domain will allow authentication to different VMware or whatever components you have, right? Your vCenter server. It can be single vCenter or multiple vCenter in that same domain. Okay, when I say domain, I'm referring to the SSO domain here. And then you can manage any VMware products like your vCenter, not vCenter, your vCloud products, or your vRealize suite, or your orchestrator, and whatever it is, right? So you can just log in to the web client once and connect to the SSO domain, and then that will authenticate you to all different components in VMware with a single sign-on. Okay, so that is the primary objective. And okay, so what happens here? So let me kind of quickly summarize. So user, this is the user on the left. Okay, user logs into vSphere web client, and then username and password is entered. Okay, and then the SSO server forwards the request to identity owner. Your identity owner can be your Active Directory system, or it can be your local operating system running vCenter, or it can be your Open LDAP or whatever it is. Okay, so once authentication is confirmed, it generates and SDS, which is nothing but your secure token. Okay, so that is important. Okay, a secure token is issued to your web client, and with that secure token, you can with a secure token you can connect or authenticate directly with vCenter, VCO, VCNS, vCenter Network and Security, or vCloud Director, whatever components that makes up your VMware product. Okay, with single token, you have the option to get authenticated directly with all VMware related processes. So these are the 5 different steps that happens as part of the single sign-on process. Okay, so this is a client or the end user. Okay, so user logs into web client, username and password is issued to the SSO. It validates against the identity source. Once it validates, it provides a security token, and that security token gets stored into your web client. And that web client, whenever you connect to different vCenter that is on the same domain, or vCloud Director, or VCNS, or VCD, whatever product you want to connect to, all VMware products gets authenticated using one single token. Okay, so that is how it is. And on the other side, as I said, there are some version dependencies. So Active Directory, I can just say it can be 2003 and above when you talk about version 5 and 6. But again, I would recommend to go for a minimum of Windows 2012 R2 AD. Okay, even though like Windows 2003 should work even now, but since they are end of life, you should not try and use it anymore. And OpenLDAP also, like it supports from version 2.4 and above. But yeah, so you guys don't use it if they are pretty old and stuff, right? So okay, so I have a lot of this GoToMeeting stuff in between, so that's the reason I'm finding hard to place it. Okay, so this is the prerequisite for your identity source system. Any questions on this so far? Clear, not clear?
Stanley, I do have one
No,
question.
Yeah.
You mentioned
Yes,
the
yes.
code. Once authentication succeeds, it generates STS. So
Right.
just want to know, like, on what base it gets succeed once
Okay, Sajid.
authentication.
So yeah. So it validates. So there are, as usual, we are talking about authentication and authorization, right? So it validates the username and password. It issues a security token as part of the authentication process. So username and password validation is called authentication, right? So, and authorization is the next step, right? Username and password validation. So authenticate is the next, authorization is the next step, where it goes and check whether you have necessary permissions on the components or objects, whatever you are going to connect. The first step is the authentication process. As part of the authentication process, you get a security token issued by the identity source, whatever you are trying to connect against. So each identity source is associated with a specific domain, right? So there might be multiple SSO domains also. So based on which SSO domain you tried connecting to the identity source, for that it provides a security token for whichever SSO domain you want to connect, or you want to use further. That security token will be mapped or matched to the SSO domain that you tried connecting in. Okay, so based on the authentication information, whatever username and password you entered, the SSO domain forwards it and gets a security token back. So in some cases, like you also get a different hash value or something to store, and then based on that you will be will not, for example, like let's take your Windows laptop. Okay, so what happens when you log in? So when you log in, like it also creates a similar hash or security token onto your laptop, and whenever you want to connect to your Skype or Teams or whatever Outlook, it does not ask you to enter username and password again and again, right? So you are just logging in once to your domain, Active Directory domain, and then you get a security token issued. Until the time you are connected, you don't have to enter any password that are directly talking to your Active Directory domain, like your Office 365 products or your Office product that is directly installed on your laptop. Okay, so you log in only once. Okay, so that is the single sign-on process. You just enter your credential only once, and based on that authentication, the entire system that is connected to your Active Directory, it will not ask for username and password again and again. So the authentication process is simplified and it is faster. Okay, so that is the main objective of single sign-on. So only once, it occurs only once. So you need not connect it again and again. So after it is connected, your vCenter server, your vCenter orchestrator, whatever I said here, right? vCenter orchestrator, the network and security, the cloud director product, everything gets connected securely using that single secure token mechanism. Okay. So with seamless connection to further VMware products, your orchestrator, network and security, vCloud director, and whatever that I have listed there, right?
I understand.
Yeah, sure. Okay then, guys. So I think this is how we started, right? By default, when you install the vCenter product, it provides you a vCenter vSphere.local domain that is like at the VMware layer. Okay, at the vCenter layer or the VMware layer. And then you can also use the existing local operating system like your Windows or Linux operating system local users and service account for any authentication and stuff. And then you have the external, right? So when I say external, it can be your Active Directory or Open LDAP. That is what we were discussing. So you can connect to all of them and then allow for login, right? So that is the single sign-on process. Okay, the identity source is nothing but a repository. Okay, identity source is nothing but a repository or any database. Okay, that holds the users and password. It's a database or repository. When you take Active Directory, they call it as ntds.dit file, which holds the repository, right? So similarly, like OpenLDAP has openldap.diff file. I mean, OpenLDAP file. Okay, there are a couple of files like LDF and the other one. Okay, ntds.dit is the AD database file. Okay, your users and passwords get stored into your identity source, which is nothing but your repository. Okay, so where users and groups are stored. Okay, what I'll do is, in the interest of time, I'll parallelly run the installation. I was waiting for you, Satish, in fact. So, in anyways, like what I'm going to do is, I just want to show you from the scratch so that you don't miss anything. So here it is. Okay, so I've just created a Windows Server operating system. I have not done anything past that. And what I'm going to do is, like I have downloaded the Vim complete ISO. Okay, the vCenter complete ISO bundle. This one which comes with VCSA is the appliance bundle. Okay, vCenter server appliance. Whenever you see VMware-VCSA, that means it's a pre bundled stuff. Whenever you talk about VMware infrastructure, like this is an installation bundle. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is, this is the last version. As I said, you can play around with installing the vCenter on a Windows. Okay, so further in 7 vCenter version 7, you will not be able to install and play around with that. It comes ready made. Okay, so I have mounted it. Okay, I'll start the installation. Let's explore the contents inside it first. Okay, so okay, I'll open it first, and then we can run the auto run. As I said, we also have update manager as a separate component in 6.7 and below, whereas in 7 this has been replaced as lifecycle manager. Okay, let me run this. Let me open up this. You have two different application installation to trigger up. So one is your regular application EXE files, and you also have a MSI file. And obviously, like when you want to run a MSI installer, you need the MSI package, the Windows installer package, to be installed in it. Okay, now I'm going to install this VMware vCenter as a Windows application. And after installation, like, it is going to help you with data center access control, performance monitoring, and whatever core components, right? Like, let's take the standard terms here. so that you get to refer it later. Okay, so it provides you access to the entire virtualized data center, monitoring, configuration, and it provides unified view of your environment. Okay, let me install it.
Stanley, just
Yeah,
one small question. So, on top of
good.
any Windows OS, we were installing vCenter server, right, to manage
Right.
this VMware hosted.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's not a particular component where we use like a OS.
No, yeah,
It's
this is
just
a
kind of
separate, yeah, it's an application or a service that runs on top of your Windows system. Yeah, it can be Windows 2008, 2008 R2, 2012 R2, or 2016 or 2019. Any OS can be utilized for installing it, but always go with the supported operating system from the vendor, right? So that which is like Windows 2012 R2 and above. So what I'm using is Windows 2016. So yeah, you can install it. As a service and you can start utilizing it. So it can be on a non-domain environment also. It can be in a work group. Earlier we used to have some complication or prerequisite. It has to be in a AD environment. But since like we have multiple external identity sources that can be used for identity purpose, they have simplified it. And then as you know, like now even the Windows based stuff is not there anymore. So you have to deploy it in an appliance. So obviously appliance will not be a domain joined one by default, right? Because it comes as a pre-bundled stuff and those things. So VMware has took a different direction at a later time, like during the times of 5 and around. Okay, so they want Active Directory environment as a prerequisite. Your system should have to be a member server in an AD domain. But now, like it's not a prerequisite anymore. You can directly install it on a fresh, newly installed Windows server. Okay, yeah. So I'm just going on with installation and selecting the license agreement. And this is what I was talking about, right? So you can have an embedded PSC in version 6. Okay, so we are installing version 6.7, right? So you can have an embedded version. When I say embedded version, both platform services controller and vCenter server can run on a single machine. But if your environment is huge and you want to have multiple vCenters in different locations, and if you want to manage more than the number of hosts it supports in a single vCenter, you might have to deploy multiple vCenter and then use the same single sign-on domain or the platform services controller to get authenticated against. So if you look at here, VMware vCenter 6.7, it requires a PSC first. Okay, so whenever you install it, the PSC is the component which gets installed first, and as part of it, you can see like vCenter single sign-on is the main component, and also besides that, you can see it also takes care of licensing and certificate management. Okay, it also takes care of licensing and whatever licenses you want, you have to enter and manage it to make your environment with active licenses. Then licensing service helps you with that. Okay, and on top of that, certificates, like if you want to secure your traffic with certificates, you download and store some certificate. So that is also part of your PSC. So PSC's main components are inventory service, web client, single sign-on. Okay, and then the licensing service and certificate management. So I'll explain these in details. Okay, so those are the 5 components that we have to keep in mind. Okay, and you can see that an embedded PSC is deployed on the same Windows host as the vCenter. If you go for the first option, when I select the second option here, you have an option to install a vCenter that can connect to an existing PSC system. Okay, so you have an external deployment option also. But again, when you go for split installation method, you have to have more resources compared to a single installation. I will show you the resource requirement. So this is my machine. Okay, stand home Windows based vCenter 1. Okay, dot stand home dot local is my home domain that I have.
So,
Okay,
so Stanley,
yeah,
just go back 1 second.
yeah,
So when we are going for an external deployment, the PSC can be one on any host, right? I mean, any VM.
yeah. It can run on any VM or a physical system. Yes,
Okay, and you can have a number of vCenter servers.
Yeah, so best practice recommendation is 4, maximum 4, but even it supports beyond that. But as a company, we generally recommend 4 and below. And even VMware says best practice is to have 4, but it supports more, as you said. Yeah,
So the platform services controller and the vCenter should be in the same OS.
it need not be in the same operating system version. It can be on 2012 and 2016 also. Yeah, it can differ also.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so this is my home FQDN. So I'm referring to my system where I'm trying to, okay, this machine which I'm logged in. Okay, this is my machine, Stan Home Windows vCenter 1. Okay, I'm just going with that. And this is what I was telling. At the VMware layer, when you install the VMware vCenter product, it creates a default domain, and you cannot change the username. It comes with administrator, and then you can change the domain name here, but it should not be the same as your Active Directory domain name. It should not be the same as your Active Directory domain name. Understand that clearly. Okay, some people tend to give stanhome.local or whatever company.com domain, whatever the AD domain, right? You should not give that here. Either it should be vSphere.local or something. You can also change it to stanhome.local, something like that, but it should not conflict with your Active Directory domain name. Okay, so have that in mind. Okay, so some people tend to give the same name as your environment domain. That will create a conflict. Okay, and you will not be able to log in, and then there will be a lot of certificate issues and so on. So I'm creating, this is very much similar to your Active Directory sites and services. Okay, so where you create a default first site and then store your first domain vCenter or the PSC, and then you add subsequent system, and then it automatically creates a default trust between all the vCenter, right? Similarly, like on the back end, the concept is pretty much the same like your Active Directory trust and those things. So I'm just creating a first PSC server and adding it to the default first site. And if you look at here, it cannot be changed after the deployment. So after you enter this domain name and the first site, if you want to change it, you can just change it to Chennai or whatever it is. Like if you are going to install it in multiple sites and stuff. And then if you want to use the main on the primary data center, you can give it any name you want. Okay. But yeah, some companies will have standard naming convention. You can use a service account from an external domain or a different thing. You can also use a Windows local system account that I have logged in now. Okay, I'm going to use the same account. In general, in companies, they might create a service account because people might go and come in, and then even the administrator accounts, you might want to use it for multiple different things. So generally, we allocate a separate account when it comes to production environment. Okay, and then that account should also have a log on as a service privilege on your group policy settings. Okay, so yeah, you can give any account that you want to use it for. Okay, I'm using a account that I have logged in here, the local administrator account, and this is
So
main thing, right? So
that service account can be from the AD, right? Or it should be
yeah, it can be from AD or it can be from your local system also. As I
okay.
said, Active Directory is not a prerequisite anymore in the latest version. So yeah, it used to be a prerequisite before, but not now anymore. So yeah, so you can use a database like whatever configurations or whatever sizing you're going to give it. It's going to create an embedded database. So this is like vPostgres is what they call. Okay, it used to be SQL Express before in versions 5 and before, like it used to be SQL Express, but they have developed their own homegrown product from the Postgres SQL, and then they have named as vPostgres, VMware Postgres. Okay, and then that is the embedded database. If you have an external Oracle database or a SQL enterprise product, you can give us DSN, but this DSN, the data source name, it has to be a 64-bit database. Okay, it cannot be a 32-bit database. So it used to be a 32-bit database for your update manager product in older versions, like in version 5 and before. Your update manager has to be on a 32-bit DSN, and then your vCenter has to be a 64-bit DSN before in versions 5 and before. But now both update manager and your vCenter, it has to be on a 64-bit database system. Okay, it should connect to a data source which is running on a 64-bit architecture. Okay, and I'm using the embedded database here, and these are the ports that you have to open up when you want to make use of it. Okay, let me kind of, okay, let me take a screenshot. I'll crop it little later. Okay, so let that be there. And as I said, so you can either connect to the default HTTP or you can use HTTPS for with certificate. And then when you want to store logs, your logs on the vCenter to a centralized system where you want to authenticate and kind of audit it at a later time, so you can use the syslog service. So the default syslog runs on 514 and the secure syslog runs on 1514. You guys know about this TLS, right? It is similar to your SSL but more secure, transport layer security. And here HTTPS refers to your SSL, okay, secure socket layer, and TLS. They are all used for security. Like see, if you go with HTTP, it is 80. HTTPS is HTTP plus SSL. Here, syslog plus TLS. So that means it is more secure. And then this is the port that the secure token service happens from your single sign-on domain to your Active Directory identity or external identity. It talks through 7444 port. If you are not getting a security token assigned, okay, then that means this port is not functioning properly. And these are all some additional ports for your vCenter. When you want to have a centralized deployment, when you want to deploy multiple vCenter systems and you want to do unattended installation and do a centralized installation stuff, you can go for auto deploy, where you can create a lot of profiles and stuff. This is for a multi vCenter environment. You can use these ports. And then if you want to collect the dump or the memory or the kernel dump from your ESXi host, you can use this port. Okay, 6500 is the default port for ESXi dump collector. It is a separate product, as I mean, again. Okay, so this is also one of the important product. Okay, so ESXi dump collector, and then auto deploy, and then the host profiles. So these are all for standardization purpose. Okay, if you have multiple vCenter environment, you can create a profile and use this auto deploy. Like this is like your remote installation services in Windows, right? So you have a centralized server to deploy your Windows system on the network, and you can create an image, you can create an unattended answer file, and with that you can have a common similar environment across your Windows landscape. Similarly, we have centralized auto deploy platform or tool through which you can do standardization and deploy vCenter on the network. Okay, and the web client uses 9443. This is the only port that you cannot customize. Okay, so vSphere web client uses 9443, and anything that connects to ESX, the port number is 902. Okay, this is a very important port in the fundamentals exam or the foundation exams. They generally ask about the heartbeat port. Whenever you want to connect to ESXi, it always talks through 902, and that is the reason the vCenter also has a similar port number. Okay, so 9 plus 443 is 9443. Okay, so 9 is the magic number in VMware environment. Okay, so 902 is for ESX, and then for the vSphere web client, 902 plus 44. They are just kind of using a combination. There are some more ports like standard ports like your DNS, Kerberos, LDAP, yes, and these port numbers are also needed, but these are all like only needed for the deployment time. But after deployment, it rarely connects or rarely talks to any of the system. But obviously, like 88 and 389, 636, these ports like 53 will be wide open in your on-premises environment for sure. Okay, but yeah, these other ports can also be considered mainly for the deployment. So since we are doing it on the same VLAN and stuff, we should not be worried. But if you are installing it on a different VLAN, your systems are going to be in different VLAN. It should not be in a different VLAN and those things. But if in case that is the case, you have to work with your firewall team to open up the ports that was listed there. So yeah, so if you look at here, if you want to go for installation vCenter with an embedded platform, as I said, it needs 6 GB of capacity, storage capacity. And then when you're going for a embedded platform services controller, I mean, these are all two are embedded only. Let me go and check the other one. Okay. Okay, let me show that a little later. Let's go with this installation path first. Okay, so as of now, what we are going is like we are going with an embedded PSC, right? So I'll show you like if I select external PSC, what are the space requirements. So as of now, the program files needs around 6 GB, and the program data generally gets stored on the non-operating system drives. Okay, it can be D drive or E drive. Okay, that needs 8 GB. So total of 14 GB is needed.
So what is that
Yeah.
store data, Stanley?
No, like the VMware, I mean, not just VMware, any Microsoft products now they have split the default system files and the I mean application related data into two different
Yes,
folders,
yes,
right?
yes.
Yeah, so
I
that
did
is
not.
the same strategy.
I was under the assumption C program files itself. I did not notice that
Yeah,
program data.
yeah, it's program data. So if you go here these days, like you can see one more folder, which is a kind of hidden folder. Let me move these things.
Yeah, I know that C program
Yeah,
data, right?
correct.
It's a
Yeah.
kind of app data or something.
Yeah, your application
Yes.
data, correct. I
I
think
did
even
not
you were
notice.
right, right,
Yeah.
understood. Yeah, but still, I just want to complete it. So, 1 minute, guys. Let me just move this.
Yeah, you can just type C program data, it will come.
Yeah. So here it is, right? So generally, your contents like your VMware and
Yeah,
those
yeah,
things
yeah.
they get into here. Yeah. Okay. So this is C program data. This is C program files. Your configuration application configuration data will be getting stored here. Okay, this is your customer experience improvement program. You can join this so that you can keep them posted with whatever the issues or whatever purpose they are trying to get the contents. You can enable it, and this is like your whatever customization you have selected so far. If you have selected different drives or different account, you can see that here. Okay, I'm just going with the installation. Let's see if it succeeds. Okay, so this is the installation steps. Let me. So now an SSO will get created with the VMware layer, and you can. Okay, so content library and a lot of things are getting installed. Okay. Okay, guys. So let's talk about some more service. So let's talk about vCenter inventory service. Okay, so this is the service which provides you with the hierarchical view of your entire VMware landscape, right? So your hierarchical view of vCenter or VMware components, like your VMware virtual data center, the cluster, the ESXi host, and then beneath that you have the resource pool, you have virtual machines and so on. Those are all arranged using the inventory service. And then this one has the inventory data. Okay, which one is a parent, which one is the child, and those kind of parent-child relationship. And then it also helps you to search the data. Okay, so search the data and access the inventory info. Okay, search and access inventory info. The inventory service, it acts as a explorer on your windows, like your Windows Explorer. Inventory service is a service which helps you to have in Windows, like we are talking about folders and files and subfolders, subfiles and those things, right? So similarly here we have an hierarchical arrangement. On top of your vCenter, you have the data center, and then you create a cluster beneath, and you have sometimes the resource pool at the cluster layer, and also you have the ESXi host, and within that you have the VMware virtual machines, right? So these arrangements, which VM part of which resource pool, and then which resource pool is part of which cluster, those parent-child relationship and the hierarchical arrangement is managed by the inventory service. It also provides search engine also along with that. Okay, and then when you install the server platform, you also need certain tools. If you are using an MSI installer, okay, you have to install the Windows installer 3.x and above. Okay, Windows installer is needed when you are triggering the installation of vCenter using .msi file. That is one thing, and also it needs .NET framework before. .NET framework. So it can be 3.5 and above, but again, yeah, better you can go for any latest version also, like 4, 4.5 or whatever latest available, but minimum of 3.5 SP1 is needed. And then with Windows installer, you need a minimum of 4.5 version. So it can be latest also, but go for a minimal version as much as possible. And you need a database, right? So we were discussing on the database stuff yesterday. So it also has a inbuilt vPostgres, which is VMware Postgres, and you can also use Oracle or SQL Server, Microsoft SQL as an external deployment. So as usual, 2008 R2 and above was what a minimal, but again 2008 is deprecated, and you have to go for any latest version as much as possible. Okay, 1 second, guys. So what else we have missed above? So did we talk about web client? Okay, so web client is something which helps you to connect using the web browsers, right? If you want to manage your environment, VMware environment or vCENTER environment, so vSphere web client provides you the option to manage through web browser based management. Okay, so here VMware vCENTER and its associated components. And then next is your dump collector. Okay, so dump collector is something which collects all the memory kernel dumps. Okay, so you have an ESXi. So whatever happens on the VM kernel, it dumps to the VMK diagnostics partition or the VMK core or the VMK diag partition. That contents it gets redirected or stored in a network system. Okay, so like your syslog server, it can be a network server what to say, share or whatever, a network share or something similar to that. So it gets stored onto a centralized network system, and then instead of, I mean, what exactly is happening, instead of storing the logs into the same system like your syslog, the dumps that is getting generated, instead of storing it to the local disk, it is kind of forwarded to a external server on the network. Okay, so whenever there is a critical issue on the ESXi system, this network system can provide you a view on what exactly has happened and what was the issue, right, on the network. So what we can say, whenever your ESXi encountered a critical failure, this particular dump file will come in handy to fix any issues. Okay, so in simple, what we can say is, like, all your memory dump is not getting stored into the local disk. Instead, the memory dump is redirected via the network to a network server. Okay, memory dump gets stored in a network server instead of the local disk. Okay, this is what I want to mean here. Okay, so that is the purpose of ESXi dump. And similarly, we can talk about the syslog server, right? Syslog server,
So you
similar
mean
to
to
your
say
memory dump.
ESXi dump collector, the PSOD?
PSOD is just a screenshot. Okay, it does not have a lot of information. Dump is complete. Whatever is there in your virtual memory and whatever is there on the system, every content is getting compressed and then gets stored as a dump. Actually, PSOD is just a single error file, right, or a screenshot of what is happening. Like it's just the outline of what is happening. It does not provide you the actual files to interrogate or investigate and get a result, right? It's just a screenshot. PSOD is nothing but a screenshot where you find whatever information we were discussing the other day, right? So PSOD is just a screenshot. Whereas when I talk about memory dump, the entire contents, the .dmp file, along with the whatever file that is getting stored into a, I mean, it needs 4 GB and above. PSOD is just a screenshot. Okay, yeah. I mean, PSOD can be a part of it, but I mean, not always you will get the PSOD file, right? Sometimes the machine might get rebooted after a few minutes, or someone on the site might restart it by doing a power press or something like that. Even you might log into the ILO and do a power reset. Not always you'll get PSOD files. If you get PSOD files, that will help you to understand the issue and what exactly the component is causing this issue. But then the dump file is something which might be 4 GB kind of contents that will have a lot of files. As part of that, you'll have something called .dmp file that can be read using Notepad++, and you can analyze it much better. Yeah, it's not just
So
PSOD. PSOD is similar to yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So in case of ESXi not reachable to vCenter, then how does, I mean, how did it will work, the ESXi dump collector?
No, it's not to the vCenter, right? So ESXi dump collector, it dumps the virtual memory contents or the memory dump to a network server. So like your syslog server, okay, it's not a vCenter server itself. It can be any server on the network. It can be any server that is reachable via the network. Also, it uses a different port, right? Just now we saw whatever the port number, right? So
Okay.
it
Okay.
does not mean like you are, yeah. So if you look at here, let me just, it's a separate deployment you can do. In the very big environment, they will not use everything on the vCenter. Okay, your syslog collector will be a separate server. Your dump collector will be a separate server. Everything will be separate. So if you look at here, 6500 is the port. Okay, it is a separate service on its own. It's not part of your vCenter. It can be on the same system that is there, but again, it's not always the same on the, for a bigger environment, it will be a separate server to collect the memory dump, and it helps you with, okay, let me, okay, that will be like that only. Yeah, so syslog collector is similar to your memory dump or whatever, but again here we are talking about system logs and whatever kernel logs. Okay, so those are getting stored in a network log server like your network dump server. This is a network log server where it collects all the logs from multiple ESXi hosts and then store it in central location so that you can correlate. Even if you can have a kind of a Splunk server or something like that to analyze the log files that you're getting from different systems, and then you can correlate what exactly is happening on different systems, so that the Splunk and those kind of intelligent logging tools will help you to correlate and get some much better view of what is happening. Okay, so dump collector, it collects the memory dump, and then the logs syslog server, it collects the system logs from all the ESXi hosts, and then it gets it stored in a centralized location. So these are all centralized location for storing your memory dump, and this one is for your system log. These are two different tools. And what else? Syslog collector, auto deploy, host deploys, VMware web client. I think there are a couple of more. Okay, so vSphere authentication proxy. Okay, so if you have an AD or whatever credentials you are using, okay, so that in that case, like the authentication, there is a service called authentication proxy where you point out to an external identity source. There is a new service that helps you with acting as a proxy, like SSO acts as a proxy to connect to your Active Directory domain controller or Open LDAP, and then it returns whatever traffic, authentication traffic or the secure token generation. This proxy server acts as a, I mean, single sign-on server acts as an authentication proxy. Okay, so what how we can name it? So to connect and retrieve AD credentials or any external identity sources, this authentication proxy acts as a proxy system for your client, whatever you want to connect. Okay, and then yeah, these are the different main components. And did I miss anything? Okay, let me check here. What is the status? Okay, it's my the main whatever we were discussing, it's getting started up. Okay, the vSphere authentication proxy, the syslog collector. Okay, whatever services we were discussing, we were, let's see, like if something comes up here, I can explain that particular services. So we talked about syslog collector authentication proxy, and also we have something called the orchestrator. Okay, let's see if that comes up. Yeah, VMware Health vSAN is your virtual SAN, software defined storage. Nowadays these are all kind of embedded into your ESXi host itself. Okay, you don't have to separately install it. It's a plugin that comes nowadays default. They have integrated it with your ESXi product. V service is the default service. Okay, let me explain that vCenter orchestrator. Okay, that is a very good tool. Okay, so to interconnect with your auto deploy or host profile or whatever stuff to manage your environment, there is something called vCenter orchestrator. So orchestrator is something where you automate or where you define a set of rules, right, or a set of workflow. So you create a workflow. For example, if you want to auto deploy a system, or if you want to do some rules, or if you want to write some set of workflow, what happens next and what happens first. Okay, so if you want to define a set of tasks, you want to create a set of workflows, right? And that workflows gets created in your orchestrator tool. So this orchestrator helps you to uh, simulate or whatever management activities. This is the main tool that acts on the back end. On the back end, if you want to create a snapshot, or if you want to delete multiple snapshot in a flow, okay, so whatever that trigger, it happens through the orchestrator. Okay, so orchestrator is the back end workflow mechanism. It also has a set of tools. You can say it's a set of workflows or a set of tools. Okay, both actually. Workflow is the primary thing in any orchestrator, but it also has sub tools, something to manage any activities that is happening in your vCenter environment. Okay, vCenter orchestrator is actually not kind of supported in IPv6. That is the only additional point that I can recollect. Yeah, so this is like kind of, it is a inbuilt, it's a pre-built thing within your vCenter. Okay, these authentication, proxy, orchestrator, these are all something pre-built. You will have option to restart those services, but you will not see it as an external component actually. So you can go and restart the service if some snapshot deletion is not working, or if you're not able to authenticate against external identity sources, you can go and restart these services. But many people tend to restart the entire system, so that they don't know what exactly has got refreshed on the back end, right? But then if some workflow is not happening, some work is not going on, like if you're triggering a backup from outside, and then that work is not getting triggered up properly, you can go and restart these orchestrator service and those things. Okay, so that it helps you with triggering up the proper uh, job that you have done. Okay, I'm just going to launch the vSphere web client. So that is the main thing that connects you to the vCenter. You can just launch it, and then you can finish it up. I'll use the default browser. Okay, what happened? No, I don't think I have a browser here. I thought I had Edge and Internet Explorer. Anyways, let me open up the Internet Explorer. I just installed this machine just before the session. I did not have any browser at all. Let me go for Chrome. Chrome or Firefox works better with your vCenter stuff. Okay, let me go with Edge is also good.
Stan,
Yeah.
Stan, one use case for using vCenter orchestrator will be, for example, like if we have the opportunity like of test environment, then in
Uh-huh.
our environment, then we can probably like automate the deployment of template using some orchestrator workflow, right?
Correct.
We can
Your
start with that.
auto deploy, yeah, auto deploy, host profile, those are all primarily depends on your orchestrator. So whatever workflow you want to do, for example, if you want to first create a vCenter, and then if you want to add certain ESXi host, and then create some resource group. So if you want to automate a certain stuff, if you want to standardize certain things, so whatever workflow you want to create in an auto deploy environment or any external tool sets, so on the back end, your orchestrator helps you to orchestrate whatever work you have defined. Like you're a musician, right? So he stands in the middle, and then he helps you to orchestrate things on the orchestra, right? So similar to that, it sits in the middle and then help you to connect different work happening between different systems. Yeah.
Yeah, why I
So
said this na is because
yeah.
na normally we VMware admin na we
Hmm.
will try to automate using Power CLI many things, which is good.
Hmm.
But if
Yeah.
we also give a try at orchestrator, na, the results will be also really good. Actually, we should give a try.
Correct. Right. Yeah. So one second. Okay. Okay, guys. So let me launch it now. Hmm. So a lot of GoToMeeting additional screens are kind of stuck in between. Let me close all these things. Mm. 1 minute, guys. Let me kind of refresh this. Wait for a minute. Okay. None of the commands are working. Let me just check what is the IP. So it is 111. So we can just connect using vSphere-client. Okay. Sometimes it takes a few minutes. Okay. So in general, it does not connect immediately. Okay. So it takes some time. Okay. So this is something which is already deprecated. Okay. So the Adobe Flash Player stuff, they have deprecated in vSphere 7. Okay. So you just have the HTML5 based client. Okay, let me authenticate with the default credentials that we created when we install the vCenter. The very first initial time, it takes some time to connect to the single sign-on and then it allows it. Okay, the first sign-on takes some time, and give it like 5 minutes minimum, and then we can just play around with that. Let it take its time. Okay, here when it comes to vSphere vCenter 7, okay, a lot of things have changed, right? As I said, the vCenter server is the only component that remains here, and then it includes, okay, it contains whatever that is there in the PSC. Like your PSC is comprising of licensing service, certificate management, SSO, vCenter, sorry, not vCenter, inventory service, and then the web client, okay, single sign-on. All these different components, they all got into the vCenter now. Okay, so like your certificate management, licensing management. Okay, so besides that, I think there is something called tags, which got introduced in later version of 6.7. Okay, so yeah, tagging is something which is more common in cloud. Even with VMware on-premises private cloud also, they brought in this tagging concept. I'll explain you what exactly tagging is, and the authentication service. Okay, and then whatever orchestrator. Okay, all these functionalities have got embedded. Okay, did I miss something here? Licensing, okay, certificate, inventory. So all these services are now part of your vCenter. Okay, so there is nothing outside of it. Everything is uh, inbuilt now. Some people call it as lookup service also. Okay, because inventory is not just inventory alone. It also has search engine. Okay, so it's a kind of lookup service also. Some people call it as lookup service. Some people call the certificate management as certificate authority. Okay, VMCA. So don't get confused if people use different terms, because like because people have worked with different versions. Okay, so they tend to use different terms. Okay, so like Windows certificate authority, even we had a term like VMware certificate authority before. If people are talking about certificate authority, they're talking about certificate management again.
So the for 6.7, the
Okay,
orchestration needs to be done separately, or it is
no,
embedded?
no, everything is embedded. Okay, so outside of whatever I have listed, see, before, if you have installed version 5.5 and 5.1, you had option to deploy these things separately. Number one thing. Number two, now we have deployed 6.7, so we had only option to have a separate vCenter or a separate PSC. Only two different component installation as a separate component is possible in 6. Versions. In 7, you don't have anything like Windows based vCenter at all. So you have an appliance that covers each and every component into your vCenter. Simple as that. You don't have an external PSE also in 7. Okay, so this is the two different components that you see on the outside. There might be a lot of sub components and sub services that runs within your PSE and vCenter, but yeah, these are the two different things that you install it. Besides this, as I said, we have something called update manager that I showed on the folder, right? So the update manager is something that is there on version 6 as a separate component. Now that is also embedded as a lifecycle manager. Okay, in vCenter 7, it is now called as a lifecycle manager. Previously, it used to be an update manager. This is the drastical difference that was brought in. Okay, so in versions 5 and before, okay, update manager was a major bottleneck because it can be installed only on your Windows server only. Okay, so that was the major problem for VMware. So the reason is, so if they want to have an appliance based environment, that appliance will not have the update manager. So in order to have a update manager for your major environment or a big size environment, you have to deploy a update manager on a Windows server. So if you are going with this approach, then obviously we are purchasing a Windows server operating system license, then going for VCSA as a separate component, having one more Windows server license for your update manager, people were not happy with that. So they went for one operating system Windows Server OS license, and then they deployed all the components like vCenter, Update Manager, and all those things in a single Windows server, and they started using it. So that is when, I mean, with versions vCenter 6, I mean vSphere 6, okay, the Update Manager happened to get an embedded option into your vCenter. Okay, that is the drastical shift actually that helped with VMware getting into the appliance market. Okay, so this is when in version 6 they embedded the update manager into the VCSA appliance. Previously, we have to have update manager running on a separate Windows server. Windows server was a mandatory requirement before in version 5 and before. But then this got shifted in version 6. That is the major thing. Okay, so the update manager component. Update manager is nothing but it is used for your updating or patching your patching the ESXi hosts, vCenter components, and then VMware tools and VM hardware, whatever it is, right? So it is used for patching and maintaining your VMware related components. Okay, so it's similar to your SCCM or your WSUS component. Update manager helps you with patching and upgrading and updating your environment, VMware environment. But again, lifecycle manager, it's the kind of more into the cloud related stuff. Okay, so but again, it replaces your update manager. Lifecycle manager is similar for updating or patching your environment, but then this is like little more robust and it has some more features. I'll show you what exactly it helps you with. Okay, so maybe for now I'll tell you like it helps you with automated patching. Okay, so it's a patching environment, and then it provides you with a centralized update mechanism. The purpose at the end is like it's used for patching. Okay, so that's the main thing, patching and updating or upgrading or whatever you can call. And you can also have version management. That is one important thing. That is why I said it is like more refined and more aligned to your private and public cloud environment. It has an option to have version management system within your lifecycle manager. That is something that is new to lifecycle manager. It automatically have option to roll back and play around with lifecycle manager. I'll show you that little later when we get into that topic. But lifecycle manager is the replacement of update manager in version 7. Okay, just be aware of that. So yeah, now you can see that it's kind of loading up. Let me get the Adobe Flash Player to play around here. Let's allow it here. Okay, I've allowed it. I'll just go back. I want to allow it. You can also use the Windows system or session authentication because you have the local OS by default available. Okay, the local Windows OS, I'll show you where exactly you can look into that details. By default, your single sign-on domain and the local OS will work because we use the local operating system credentials to log in. Okay, yeah, we have logged in now. You can also launch the vSphere client, which is HTML5 based, but in version 6, okay, this had some disadvantages, or when I say disadvantages, few options were not able to be managed properly with HTML5, but with version 7, they have only vSphere client, which is HTML5 alone. Okay, so this is like kind of drastical change in vSphere 7. Okay, so in with vSphere 7, I think I already mentioned that somewhere on the top. So you have only HTML5 based client. Oh, I did not mention it. Okay, so with vSphere 7 or vCenter 7, you have only HTML5 client. Previously, like we had both Adobe Flash based vSphere web client and vSphere HTML5 client. So with in version 6, okay, these are all like related to 6, these are related to 5 and kind of 7, something like that. Okay, and with vSphere web client, you had all the options, all the management features available in version 6. It had few like 4 to 5 options is not manageable using HTML5, but then all these things got fixed, and now HTML5 based client is the only option available, and it is very lightweight. As you can see, it is HTML based, and it is Adobe, right? You need to install Adobe Flash on the server side. On the client side, okay, you need to have Adobe Flex, okay, which is a client plugin equivalent to Adobe Flash. There is a client plugin that needs to be imported or installed on your client machine from wherever you are connecting from. Okay, so this is the major challenge, right? If you have a jump server, or if you have a client machine, some companies will not allow you to add any plugin or install any additional component, right? So that was a major challenge. But then now they went into HTML5 based client, where no other plugins or additional settings need not be done. You can directly log into the web-based management of vCenter using the HTML5 client with all the options available in vCenter 7. Okay, now we are logged in here. I can just try and launch this also. So in order to launch this, you have to mention the vCenter name. It can be your IP address, or it can be your server name, or your fully qualified domain name /UI. Okay, so if you type in /UI, it takes you to your HTML based client, your FQDN or whatever it is, right? So your FQDN or IP address or the host name of the host name of the vCenter /UI takes you to the HTML5 client. And if you want to log into your Adobe Flash based web client, you have to use vSphere -client, which connects you to the web client environment. This is for connecting to vSphere web client. So people get confused, right? Both are web browser based, but again, this is based on Adobe Flash, and they used to call it as web client. Now they are just calling it as a vSphere client alone, which is HTML5 based. Both are connected using web browsers. Okay, that doesn't mean web browser is equal to something here. So yeah, you use web browser to connect to either HTML5 version of vSphere client or Adobe version of vSphere client. So I log in here. So you can see, feel like this is very lightweight. It does not show any plugins or blocking. Something else of that sort is not here. Okay, so it takes you directly to the login, and then you are able to log in and authenticate. This is more lightweight and much quicker. I mean, first time it always takes some time, but still, like the HTML5 is much faster. And if you look at the authentication mechanism, it happens through the SAML protocol, right? It is cloud native open source authentication. It's not your Kerberos and those things. Kerberos, your native Windows Active Directory authentication, right? Your single sign-on and those things, it works using the security assertion markup language, the SAML. The single sign-on happens through SAML protocol in the default authentication on the backend. So SAML is the authentication protocol, similar to your Kerberos in Windows world, right? Security assertion markup language. It is the open source cloud native authentication protocol. It works very well with the web environment through web browsers and authentication. It works well. You can say open source native authentication protocol, but again, open source authentication protocol is fine. Many cloud environment like your AWS and Google and even Azure for that matter, they are also utilizing SAML as an authentication protocol on the web, on the cloud native applications. Okay, it has logged in now. see it, it looks very light, and you don't have to do any changes or plugins or something like that, but it looks a little different compared to your this is like your more traditional VMware environment, where you see VMware vSphere client. It looks like pretty much similar to your vSphere client, but then this one is very much lightweight, and then it's not more colorful and stuff, but again it does not have good level of grids and those things, but still it is lightweight and you can connect to anything on the environment. So let me show you how to first integrate with an AD environment. Okay, so you have deployed it now, and if you go to the menu, you have different options like your auto deploy, the policies and those things. And if you go below, there is something called administration. This is the first thing that you do when you deploy the vCenter. You get into the administration, and then you start adding in whatever plugins you needed, and then connect it to the authentication sources outside of your single sign-on vCenter and something like that. Okay, so let me try and connect to the go to the configuration. This is your single sign-on which we are talking about in the morning, right? So if you go to the configuration, you have the identity source. So under the identity source, you have option to add an identity source, like this can be your Active Directory over LDAP, Open LDAP, and the local operating system. And I'm just canceling it. If you can see here, the local OS, the Windows operating system users and groups are already available by default as an identity source. And then you have the system domain, which gets created as part of your vCenter deployment. These two options are by default available. Okay, you can change the default. If you change it to default, whatever you have as a username and users and groups on your local operating system on the Windows side, that can be used as a login. Okay, if you set this as default. But then if you want to join to Active Directory, you can join to the Active Directory domain. So as of now, yeah, it's already joined because this machine is part of the domain now. Okay, so you can leave and add it to the domain. And if you want to add an identity source of Active Directory, you can go and click here. You can select Windows Integrated Authentication and then give the domain name. Okay, in my case, I have a home lab with domain named as stanhome.local. This is my home lab domain name. If you have some companyx.com, give that in your company, and then it gets added like this. Okay, now you will be able to log in with the username and password that is from the Windows Active Directory domain. That is also available now. So we have three layers, right? So one is your local OS layer, the next one is the VMware layer, and the other one is the external identity layer. Three different layers of identity sources. Okay, so you can give some fancy things like you want to give a message when someone logs in, like you can say that this is a authenticated, or this is a my more critical systems. Okay, and only authenticated people should log in and those stuffs. Okay, those like fancy items can be done here. Okay, let me try and
So, Stanley, when we go for VMware layer, do we need to how to create a user ID? I mean, without going to identity.
okay, you want to create
Just
some
wanted to
users.
create a user ID within
Okay,
VMware
so
layer.
okay, so you go to users and groups and single sign on, create it here.
Okay,
You have an option called users and groups within that. Okay, these are the default stuff. Okay, if you go to the vSphere local, this is where you create the default VMware layer users. So okay, let me create one user. Okay, so I'll create ila. Okay, and I'll give password. So I'm creating it on the vSphere.local layer. Okay, ila shanmugam. Okay, ila.shanmugam at stanhome.local local. Okay, is it okay? So you have to make use of the drop down to create the users, and go to the groups tab to create the groups here.
got it. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Now, okay, so whenever you start anything with the vCenter environment, the very first thing is you create a data center. only after creating a virtual. This doesn't relate to your physical data center, but it is more aligned to your physical location. Okay, so where you create separate data center based on your separate locations, like if you have different data center environment like Chennai, Mumbai, or like globally, like if you have data centers in UK, US, and those things, you can create a data center based on the physical location. Okay, the very first thing is you have to add a data center. Like, the reason I say that, you don't see any option to add a ESXi host at the very top, right? So once you create a data center, if you right click on that, you will have option to add a ESXi host or create a cluster or whatever it is. So on the second layer, you get the option to create a cluster or a host. On the very first layer, you get option to create a data center. That is the main thing. And then even you can create a folder also. Okay, I can just say Mumbai folder. And if you right click on that folder also, you can see that there are some options available, like new data center and those stuffs. Okay, so this is one more layer of container to group your objects. Okay, you can group, folder is a folder, right? It's a container to have sub components or sub objects within that. And generally, like, we add ESXi host and cluster as far belong, I mean, next to the data center. Let me check if I have any ESXi online. So this is already managed by one more vCenter, but still, like, that is fine. I'll try and use it, add it here also. It will throw an error, but let's try it. 1 minute, guys. I think the IP address is 104 or 106, something like that. It's 104. Okay, let me try and add it here. So I'm going to you guys are still hearing me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I'm seeing a freeze here. Okay, anyways. So let me enable remote and then connect to this directly. Sorry, not the device manager. Okay, let us play around here. So I'll take remote a little later. So we want to add the ESXi host here, right? Add host 192.168.0.104. Hello.
Yes, only.
Okay. My network, I mean, the power supply is gone down. I'm just connected back using my mobile. You guys are still seeing my sharing, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we can see.
Yeah.
It's saying something like a
Yeah,
reconnecting.
okay. Yeah, right. Yeah, my desktop, it gets connected through what to say, my network, the broadband router. The broadband router is powered off because of the power supply thing. Okay, let me just check it. let's see what we can do here. Give me a couple of minutes, guys, and let me just see if I can connect a network cable directly to the router. Sorry guys, it is powered off, right? My desktop is already powered down. 1 minute. I'm just trying to connect my network cable and then I'm seeing the desktop is powered off. 1 minute. No other option. 1 minute. Let me try and discuss on some theory part. Let me connect the cable again on the router. Okay, so what we can do is let's kind of discuss the core important components. Okay, while this comes up. Okay, so let's discuss at the service level. Okay, so when it comes to the latest versions, okay, whenever you go for an appliance kind of thing, the main service is called the appliance management service. Okay, so they call it as appliance management service or the WAMI service. Okay, so that is the default service that helps you with connecting to an appliance environment. And then when there is an issue like if you're not able to collect the logs, or if you're not able to get the logs from your vCenter environment, you can use the syslog health service and then check whether the syslog is service, the client service is running on the vCenter side and on the ESXi side, so that the logs are getting stored. And then sometimes you will not be able to retrieve the license information, or whatever license is actually stored on a file on the back end inside the vCenter environment. And then there is a service that runs on the vCenter level to fetch that licensing information from that file. So that is actually license service or licensing service sometimes. Okay, in some version it is meant as license service, in some version it is called licensing service. And there is one more service called certificate service. If you're not able to log in using TLS or your SSL secure socket layer, there is something called secure certificate service. And if you're not able to connect to an external identity like OpenLDAP or Active Directory, there is some issue with the security token service that runs on your vCenter itself. Okay, so these are all some sub services. Like your if you take your Windows system, there are a lot of services inside it, right? It does different functionalities, and people don't get too much into that. But still, here also I just want to help you with some understanding. If you're not able to see the inventory listing, go and check the inventory service and then the directory service. So different services or components are interconnected, so you can just restart a specific service to fix a specific issue, right? So that's the reason I'm just talking about these different steps. Okay, so syslog, you can also call, some people call it as common log service. In different version you see a different name. Okay, but with latest version 7, these are some of the common names that we use. I think we have covered everything. Even with security token, sometime it is called as identity management service. You restart both the service. Okay, sometimes you can see dependencies, so it will restart whatever interlinked service like your Windows. Okay, so these are the main different services. If you are not able to control certain services, for example, if you have a vSAN and then you're not able to control that service, so that is also like there is something called, with the name itself you can easily identify what the purpose is. Okay, service control agent or service control. Okay, so yeah, these are the main things. And when you have a vCenter managing your ESXi host, what are the two different components that interconnects your ESXi host and vCenter? We discussed that yesterday. Even Neela asked a question on that. What are the two different services?
Stan, host
Yeah,
daemon,
yeah,
ESXi host
host
daemon,
daemon.
and
Yeah, host daemon.
VP,
Yeah, VP.
VPXE.
Yeah, VPXA. VPXA runs on the
VPXA and VPXD. VPXA runs on the I mean the client end, and
No,
VPXD runs on the. One second, just hold on. Yeah, am I clear? Uh, okay,
yeah,
so
your line
VPXD,
is clear. Yeah.
yeah, so VPXD, I mean, runs on vSphere client. I mean, it is used to communicate with the vSphere client and the ESXi, whereas VPXA used to communicate with vCenter and ESXi. Okay, so
Okay,
the
fine. Yeah,
agent runs on the ESXi.
right.
Okay,
Okay, I've done whatever it is they required. Okay, yeah. So and also make sure there are a lot of different port numbers, right? So 80 and 443 are the most important ports. But when it comes to ESXi host, I set a port number. What is that?
sorry, come again. What is that?
There is a important port on the ESXi system. Okay, I just
902
yeah,
hard pick.
902. Always this port number should come to your mind. Okay, whenever we talk about ESXi system, okay, the 902 is the port number that should come to your mind. Okay, so the electricity power has come back. Okay, let me reconnect to my broadband. One second, guys, so that we can just quickly deploy the appliance also. I mean, the network will get reconnected. I'll switch over from my mobile to broadband. Okay, guys, I'm back on the network. So it took some time for the router to come up after power recycle. Okay, the network is re-established, and obviously this will I'll have to start it. I think everything will. Okay, so we have to start it from the scratch. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll also deploy a vCenter appliance in parallel. Okay. So all my machines went down abrupt. Let's see it gets started automatically. Okay, I'll just power on. Okay, don't want to do anything with the domain controller. Let me power up the ESXi host alone, and I'll show you how to deploy a vCenter appliance. Let me see what kind of images I have here. Okay, images. I have VCSA 7, VC. Okay. Okay, let's do one thing. We have a Windows-based vCenter. We have around 14 minutes. Okay, let's do a deployment of vCenter appliance. Okay, let's give its time to boot and those things. Okay, so whenever we talk about installation and upgrade or migration, what are the important services that you have to look around on your network? Okay, let me take it in an order. Okay, so whenever we talk about install or upgrade or migrate, okay, always few things has to come into your mind. Okay, so install, upgrade, or update, or migrate, or whatever it is. Okay, so the very first thing, whenever it comes to VMware products, the first thing is hardware compatibility, because VMware removes support for certain processor model and certain components in their latest version. So hardware compatibility list is the very first thing when you have to look at in any VMware related activities. It can be an install, upgrade, or migrate, or whatever it is. The first thing, check your hardware compatibility list, and then check your product interoperability matrix. Okay, so that is something different from compatibility list. So check which products will work or will not work on your VMware, and even external to VMware. Check the product interoperability matrix. Second thing. The third thing is we should check the hardware requirements and the software requirements. You guys are listening to me, right? And you're following me. Hardware
Yeah.
requirements and software requirements. Yeah. Okay, and then what is the next thing you check? We were talking about certain services yesterday, right? Network related services, your NTP, your DNS. So these are all basic fundamental services which you have to rely upon. Okay, so important service, network service 1, network service 2. Okay, NTP and DNS are most important. And besides that, when it comes to ESXi or your system where you are going to deploy your vCenter, ESXi should not be in locked mode or lockdown mode, and ESXi should not be in maintenance mode. We already discussed this yesterday. Okay, I'm not just talking about it today alone today. So we
Yeah.
discussed these things today. So yeah, so I'm referring these things we should actually consider for anything, any activities, migration or upgrade or whatever, because you are changing from one version to one new version, right? So obviously, like if you're deploying, if there are some requirements like this, obviously for migrating and upgrading also you should have a similar requirement. And obviously you should check at the HADRS cluster settings, especially DRS settings on the cluster level. Okay, so DRS settings on the VMware cluster. So the reason I say that, the DRS is distributed resource scheduler, right? Distributed resource scheduler. This is a kind of cluster related service. What it does is it schedules the resources on different ESXi host based on the load it runs. Okay, so for example, if you have multiple ESXi host, okay, ESXi 1, 2, and 3, and this DRS, what it does is load across the ESXi host based on the resource requirement. Okay, so I will get too much detail into this a little later, but as of now, since I'm using this DRS settings as a word here, I just want to tell you that this is the kind of load balancer across your, compute load balancer, not your network load balancer. It balances your CPU and memory requirements across multiple ESXi hosts for your virtual machine. Okay, and then this DRS settings has to be validated. When I say validated, the DRS settings should not be enabled for automatic. It has to be either disabled or set to manual, so that the vCenter, when it gets installed, it might need more CPU and memory. What happens is the DRS, it will intelligently move that vCenter to different ESXi hosts. That will interrupt your upgrade or migration or installation process. So obviously, until the time that the vCenter migration or the deployment or upgrade is happening, you should have the DRS setting set to manual or disabled until you complete the activity. Okay, obviously you need to have certain ports. Okay, so port requirements are always there. You have to look at the port requirements like 80, 443, 23 or 22. Okay, so these ports are kind of default ports. In general, you have to check without any doubt. Okay, so 22 port is actually that is where the vCenter appliance also it works. Okay, people will think only when you connect to ESXi host port 22 is needed, but for appliance also port 22 is very mandatory. Okay, so port 22 is also used by appliance, also is also used by VCSA vCenter appliance. Okay, so without this port 22 working on your vCenter appliance, your upgrade will fail. Okay, so port 22 is needed for both inbound and outbound connection of on your vCenter appliance. Okay, for the upgrade process 22 port is used. Okay, so let me check. I'll log into the ESXi host and then power up the vCenter if it is already there. 192.168.104 is the ESXi host. Okay, so I already have a couple of VMs. I'll just power it off. So this is 6.7. Okay, I'll create one more new vCenter on top of this. Okay, so in order to deploy the appliance, okay, these are the steps that we have to follow. Go to your vCenter appliance folder. We'll go for 6.7 first and then upgrade it to 7 later, or else we can go for 6.5 and upgrade it to 7 also, whatever. Okay, because like our class is more focused to 6.7, let's do an installation of 6.5 and upgrade it to 6.7. We'll migrate from Windows based vCenter of 6.7 to VCSA 7. Okay, we'll do different combinations here. Okay, let me do a appliance deployment of 6.5 first. Okay, as you guys know, 6 is the major version and 6.5 5 is the minor version, 7 is the minor version. Okay, so these are all minor versions within version 6, so there is not much differences when it comes to minor versions. Is only some minor patch fixes and then minor component changes are done. Only with major versions like 6 to 7 or 5 to 6, they do a drastical change in the architecture. Okay, so with minor versions only like few sub component changes and then the feature like what not the feature like the bug fixes are done. Okay, I've just mounted the 6.5 ISO. So here if you open it up, you have the installer options like VCSA command line installer and then the graphical installer. And let me go here. You can directly use this OVF file and then you can deploy it using this OVF tool, or you can directly go to your even your workstation and then go to file and then you can deploy. uh, 1 minute, let me select the computer. You can deploy a new machine using a virtual machine. Okay, let me do it. So if you go here, 1 second guys, instead of doing like this, what you can do is go to the folder, just right click on this and then open with VMware workstation. If you do this, automatically a new VM will get created using that appliance file. Okay, so I accept, click next, VCSA server 2, something like that. So you can choose whatever combination you want. Yesterday we were discussing about tiny, small, medium, large, and extra large, right? So these are the different combinations, and you can see different permutation and combination, because you have an option to install vCenter separately and PSE separately, right? So that is the reason you see like 20 different options. But on the high level, it is only 5 different t-shirt sizes: tiny, small, medium, large, and extra large. If you look at here, you can see how much CPU, memory, and disk space is needed, and then how much it supports, like 10 ESXi host and 100 VMs. If you go to medium, you can see that 8 virtual CPU and 24 GB is needed, and then it supports up to 400. Whatever calculation, whatever thing we discussed yesterday, right? The same thing. If you go for extra large, this is the maximum support on version 6.5. Okay, so 24 vCPU, 48 GB of RAM, and it can support up to 35,000. We were discussing all these things yesterday, if I'm not wrong. So we were discussing all those sizing and those things, right? So these are the things I'm referring to. Okay, so this is like all on vSphere 7. Okay, but with vSphere 6, this is what we saw yesterday, right? The same thing we are seeing it here: 2000 host and 35,000. So based on the data center requirement or your environment requirement, you can select whichever thing you want to. You can select the tiny and then start deploying it. Okay, this is one way of deploying it. You can deploy it on the VMware workstation itself if you want to, but then in production environment, they deploy it on a virtual machine on a ESXi host in production. We'll go with the production strategy here. So in order to do that, you don't have to go to here. You can go to the UI installer. You can start the installation or trigger the installation from Windows or Linux or MacBook. I have a Windows machine from where I'm going to trigger the deployment. Go to the installer under Win32. I'm just going to trigger the installer. It will help me to open up a appliance installer screen. These are the 4 different options that are getting presented with this installer option. Okay, so install, upgrade, migrate, and restore. So now we are going to install. We'll talk about upgrade, migrate, and backup and restore on Friday class. Okay, let's do a install now. And then it gives me an option to deploy every installation starting with version 6. It is a 2-staged installation. Okay, stage 1 and stage 2. In the very first stage, we deploy it, and on the very second stage, we set up the appliance, we configure the appliance. It is a two-staged deployment in starting with version 6 and above. Okay, so the first stage is deploying, second stage is configuring. There is nothing called installation of appliance, right? Because appliance, it already has the vCenter pre-deployed or pre-installed and pre-configured. So we can just do a staged deployment only, nothing like installation. We installed the vCenter on Windows, whereas when it comes to appliance, we have to deploy it. It is already installed, we are deploying it. Okay, we are deploying it and setting it up. So the very first screen, it talks about license agreement, similar to our Windows based installation. It's very same screen only. Okay, there is not much differences. Okay, I'm just going to select the same thing here. So here I'm going to give the ESXi host on which I'm going to install. You can, if you already have an existing vCenter, you can give the vCenter name, like on your Windows stuff. You had a Windows vCenter, right? You can give that name. Or if you want to give the ESXi host also, that is fine. I'm going to give the ESXi name. And then the username will be the root and password for the ESXi host. If you are selecting the vCenter, you can give a vCenter username and password, administrator at vSphere.local, and the password that I gave on the vCenter. You can either use vCenter or the ESXi host. I'm now deploying it on a ESXi host. It connects using port number 443. It validated the username and password. Now I am giving a username and password for your vCenter appliance. Okay, VCSA server 3 or something like that. I'm going to give vCenter server 3 root password. I'll just give a password. So this is very equivalent to your Windows based installation, but we are deploying the appliance here. At the end, we are going to get a new vCenter. The same thing, same screen what we see in workstation, right? So if you want to tiny have an environment, if you want a small environment, based on that, this tabular column will help you, right? This is for 6.7, 6.5. Okay, version 6.5. So we are going with tiny version. because we don't need to have more than 10 ESXi, those things like tiny is more than sufficient. And obviously at home you need to have that amount of capacity. Okay, we need 10 GB of memory and 2 CPU for your vCenter appliance. Here free space is 23. Okay, let me use this 25 GB data store. So how much capacity we need? We need up to 250 GB for 6.5. In version 7 we need up to 410 even for the smallest of installation. Okay, but then you have an option to go with thin mode installation, and that means you can install whatever the basic minimal contents. So otherwise, if you're not enabling this thin mode, you will not be able to proceed further. It will say it needs minimum of 250 GB. So I'll say like I'm going with thin mode so that it might allow us. Again, it needs minimum of 25 GB. So we have got around only 23 GB here. So what I'll do is I'll kind of quickly present a new disk here. Mm, 40 GB is fine. Okay, I've created a 40 GB disk. I'll go to the storage on the ESXi level. Guys, don't worry about it. Okay, I'll show you all these things when it comes to the storage session and those stuff. I'll show you how to add and those things. I think you might have already seen when we deploy the ESXi host, but still like we'll discuss it
Stanley, I'm
later. Yeah. You're logging off, huh? Okay, okay, okay. Take care, guys. Yeah. So yeah, so you have an option to select VMware VMFS 6 and 5. Okay, so when you have ESXi host running on VMFS 5, for backward compatibility you have to select 5. But if in case all the systems are 6 and above, you can go for 6. Okay, so it depends on your environment. So I'm going with a new data store to deploy the vCenter appliance. Now let me go back. Now I can see the 40 GB disk here. Okay, I need minimum of bare minimum 25 GB. Okay, but if in case you are going with thick mode installation, you need 250 GB for 6.5 vCenter, and for 7 you need 410 GB. Okay, so now I've deployed used the 40 GB disk, and I can give the same basic things that I gave on the other system. Okay, I'm going to give a system name. So this will be VCSA server 3. Okay, IP address will be 192.168.0 dot what is that 112. I'll give. I already used 111 for the other system, so I'll give a fully qualified domain name. You can give an IP also here. That doesn't okay, so it says like it is not resolvable, so that means it is checking the DNS. Okay, that is very important here. So what I'll do is I'll create a DNS entry quickly, whether my domain controller is on, right? Okay, you can also if you don't have a domain, go to the host files and then update the host file with the entry whatever you want to resolve. But if in case you have a domain controller environment, use the DNS server. It depends on your environment. Okay, now I have created that. So let me go and resolve and do NS lookup, name server lookup, VCSA S3. Okay, okay, it's working. Okay, now the error should have gone here. So there was a warning here, right? It went away now. This is my home subnet. Okay, and I can just give a DNS server to which it should connect. This is my domain controller, and I can give whatever I want to give. Okay, so this is a global Google DNS, right? Yeah. and then I can finish it off. Okay, this will deploy. The very first stage will happen at the beginning. The very first stage is deploying vCenter. The second stage is configuring vCenter. Okay, so with that, we'll deploy the first stage now, and then the second stage will continue on Friday's class. Okay, because like people want to start to office. So I'll stop the recording.